Admiral Elias Ward stood motionless in the observation chamber of Eden's Wrath, his hands clasped behind his back. The chamber was dimly lit, designed to mimic the timeless void of space outside. Through the reinforced glass, he gazed upon a vast expanse of darkness punctuated by the cold, distant shimmer of stars. The asteroid belt stretched out before him like a chaotic sea of ancient, drifting stones, each one silently marking the passage of eons. Among them, Eden's Wrath rested quietly, an unassuming giant cloaked in the guise of a lifeless rock. From the outside, it seemed to be nothing more than just another asteroid, its surface jagged and uneven, with deep craters and scarred ridges carved by imaginary millennia of cosmic collisions. It was a perfect disguise, a masterpiece of human ingenuity. But beneath that rocky facade lay a secret so profound, so powerful, that it could change the fate of the galaxy forever. Deep within the hollowed-out core of this artificial world, there were no signs of the barren, lifeless exterior. Instead, there were sprawling cities of steel and light, interconnected by labyrinthine tunnels and massive chambers humming with energy. The air inside was alive with the quiet hum of machinery and the faint vibrations of systems running flawlessly. This was humanity's greatest achievement, a fortress capable of reshaping the stars themselves. Commander Alina Voss, report status, Elias said, his voice steady and commanding, though it carried a weight of expectation. He had waited decades for this moment, and now it was so close he could feel it in his bones. A soft crackle broke the silence as Alina's voice came through the comms. Construction is 98% complete, Admiral. The propulsion systems are fully operational, and the main weapon is ready for its first test. We're ahead of schedule. Her tone was professional, but there was a faint edge of pride beneath it. She, like everyone else aboard Eden's Wrath, knew the significance of what they were building. Elias allowed himself a rare smile, the corners of his lips lifting slightly. It wasn't joy that he felt, but something deeper, a quiet vindication. Humanity had been underestimated for so long. For decades, they had been treated as little more than laborers, a species fit only for mining rocks and building stations for the so-called advanced civilizations of the galaxy. They had been given scraps of technology, just enough to keep them productive but never enough to rise above their station. But humanity had not been idle. While the galactic powers looked down on them, humans had been watching, learning, and adapting. They had taken what little they were given and turned it into something extraordinary. And now, hidden in the shadows of the asteroid belt, they had created Eden's Wrath. This was not just a ship. It was a declaration. A silent, unyielding statement to the galaxy: humanity would no longer be treated as second-class citizens. They would no longer bow to the arrogance of the Aetherines, the brutality of the Zarith, or the condescension of the Kreath. They had built something that no other species could have imagined, something that would ensure their survival and their place among the stars. Elias turned his gaze back to the endless expanse of space, his expression unreadable. The stars seemed distant, cold, and indifferent to the struggles of the beings who lived beneath their light. But he knew better. The galaxy was not a place of peace or fairness. It was a place where only the strong survived, and the weak were crushed underfoot. "Alina," he said after a moment, his tone softer now, almost reflective. "Do you think they'll understand what this means? What we've built here?" There was a pause before she replied. "I don't think they'll understand, Admiral. Not until it's too late." Elias nodded slowly, her words resonating with a truth that he had long accepted. The galactic powers had grown complacent in their superiority, blind to the quiet determination of the species they had dismissed. They would not see Eden's Wrath for what it was until it was revealed in full force. For decades, humanity had labored in secret, their efforts hidden behind the guise of asteroid mining and mundane construction projects. They had built this weapon in silence, brick by brick, system by system, while the galaxy looked the other way. Now, it was almost ready. Good, Elias said finally, his voice firm again. Let them underestimate us. It's the last mistake they'll ever make. He turned away from the observation window, the faint smile fading from his face. There was still much to be done. The galaxy had no idea what was coming, and Elias intended to keep it that way until the moment it was too late for anyone to stop them. As he walked down the corridor, the faint hum of the ship seemed to echo his thoughts. Humanity had been patient for far too long. Now, their time had come. Eden's wrath was not just a weapon. It was a promise that humanity would never be underestimated again. 50 years ago, under the vast and indifferent gaze of the cosmos, humanity found itself drawn into the Galactic Concord, a grand coalition of alien species that wielded power across the known galaxy. It was a union teeming with diversity, each species contributing its unique strengths to the collective might of the Concord. The Zarith, with their cold-blooded determination and fearsome prowess, were the warriors of the galaxy. Their scales glistened like polished armor, and their eyes held a predatory gleam that spoke of countless battles won. They moved with a fluid grace, their every action a testament to their martial supremacy. The Kriath, insectoid in form, were architects of unparalleled skill. Their cities sprawled across planets, intricate and beautiful, woven from the very fabric of the universe. Their minds worked like clockwork, precise and unyielding, crafting structures that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Then there were the Aetherines, beings of pure energy who floated above the mundane concerns of physical existence. They shone with a radiant light, their forms shifting and shimmering like living stars. They claimed the mantle of intellectual elites, their wisdom said to be as boundless as the galaxy itself. Amidst these titans, humanity was but a whisper, a fledgling race seen as primitive laborers. The Concord, in its arrogance, assigned humans the most menial of tasks, mining the ores from barren asteroids, constructing the grand visions of other species, and transporting goods across the vast emptiness of space. To the aliens, humans were simple creatures, lacking the intellect and ingenuity to pose any real threat. But beneath the surface of this apparent simplicity, humanity harbored a secret, a quiet rebellion born of necessity and nurtured by ambition. While the Concord dismissed them, humans observed and learned. They studied alien technologies with a voracious curiosity, dissecting them and understanding their intricacies in ways the creators could never fathom. In hidden facilities scattered across remote outposts, far from the prying eyes of the Concord, humans worked tirelessly. They improved upon the technologies they had been given, transforming them into something new, something powerful. They developed weapons that could tip the balance of power, systems that could outsmart even the most advanced alien designs. These efforts were shrouded in secrecy, a silent revolution against the chains of galactic arrogance. Humanity planned for the day when they would no longer be underestimated, when they would rise from the shadows and claim their place among the stars. The Concord, in its hubris, remained oblivious to the storm brewing within the human ranks. They continued to see humans as mere tools, never suspecting the depth of ingenuity and resilience that lay beneath the surface. But humanity knew that every step forward was a step closer to liberation. In the hearts of humans burned a quiet determination, a resolve to prove themselves not as laborers, but as equals. They dreamed of a future where their voices would be heard, where their contributions would be recognized, and where they would stand shoulder to shoulder with the other species of the galaxy. This dream fueled their secret endeavors, driving them to innovate, to adapt, and to prepare for the day when the galaxy would see them for what they truly were, not just survivors, but pioneers. Humanity was not content to be a footnote in the annals of galactic history. They were determined to write their own story, one of triumph and transformation. And so, while the Concorde basked in its self-assured superiority, humanity quietly built its legacy, a legacy that would one day reshape the stars and redefine the very nature of the galaxy itself. The galaxy's fragile peace, a delicate illusion that had endured for centuries, was shattered in a single, merciless act. The Zarith Empire, with its endless hunger for conquest, descended upon the Lumerans, a species so gentle, so devoted to art and philosophy, that they had no concept of war. Their crystalline cities, which shimmered like frozen rainbows under the light of their twin suns, were symbols of beauty and wisdom. For millennia, they had stood as a testament to the Lumerans' pursuit of harmony, untouched by the violence that plagued other worlds. But on that day, the skies of Lumera Prime darkened with the hulking silhouettes of Zarith warships. Their arrival was sudden, their intentions clear. Without warning, the first bombardments rained down. The once vibrant cities, with their spires of translucent crystal and intricate bridges that seemed to float on air, erupted into clouds of ash and fire. The screams of the Lumirans echoed across the planet, a haunting symphony of despair that would never be forgotten. Captain Darius Holt stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, his ship drifting near the edges of the Lumeran system. The distress signals came in waves, each one more desperate than the last. His crew worked in tense silence, their faces pale as they listened to the cries for help. "This is Captain Holt of the Vanguard," he said, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging within him. "I'm witnessing the Zarith fleet committing genocide. Requesting immediate assistance." The response came moments later, cold and detached, as though it were nothing more than a routine bureaucratic matter. "Captain Holt, please file a formal report. The Council will review the matter in due course." Darius felt the words like a punch to the gut. His fists clenched at his sides, his nails digging into his palms. "File a report," he muttered under his breath, his voice trembling with fury. He turned his gaze back to the view screen, where the Zarith fleet methodically obliterated the planet below. Streams of fire fell from the heavens, carving deep scars into the land. Entire cities vanished in seconds, their beauty reduced to smoldering ruins. The Lumirans had no defenses, no weapons to fight back. They were a people of peace, their lives devoted to the creation of art, music, and philosophy. Their crystalline sculptures, said to capture the very essence of light and sound, were treasures admired across the galaxy. Now, those treasures were being destroyed, their creators slaughtered without mercy. Darius could see it all, the panic in the streets as Lumirans fled for their lives, their delicate forms illuminated by the fires consuming their homes. He could imagine the parents shielding their children, the artists clutching their creations as if they could somehow protect them from the destruction. And above it all, the Zarith ships loomed, cold and unfeeling, their weapons raining death upon the helpless. The bridge of the Vanguard was silent, save for the faint hum of the ship's systems. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, their eyes filled with the same helpless rage that burned within their captain. They were soldiers, trained to protect, to fight for those who could not fight for themselves. But now, they were being told to stand down, to watch as billions of innocent lives were extinguished. Darius's jaw tightened, his teeth grinding together as he fought to contain his anger. The Concorde had always been slow to act, weighed down by endless debates and bureaucracy. But this was beyond negligence. It was complicity. The Council's indifference was a death sentence for the Lumirans, and Darius knew it. He turned away from the view screen, unable to watch any longer. His hands gripped the edge of the command console, his knuckles white. "They're just going to let this happen," he said, his voice low and filled with bitterness. "They're going to sit in their chambers and debate while an entire species is wiped out." One of his officers, a young woman with tears glistening in her eyes, spoke hesitantly. "Captain, what can we do? If we intervene, the Concorde dash." "To hell with the Concorde," Darius snapped, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. He straightened, his eyes blazing with determination. "This isn't about politics. This is about doing what's right." The crew looked at him, their expressions a mix of fear and hope. They knew the risks of defying the Concorde, of going against the orders of the Council. But they also knew that standing by and doing nothing was a betrayal of everything they stood for. Darius took a deep breath, his resolve solidifying. Humanity had waited long enough. They had watched as the other species of the galaxy abused their power, as the Concorde turned a blind eye to suffering. But this was the breaking point. The massacre of the Lumirans was a line that could not be crossed. "Prepare the ship," he ordered, his voice steady and commanding. "We're going in." The crew sprang into action, their hesitation replaced by a grim determination. They knew the odds were against them, that the Vanguard alone could not stop the Zarith fleet. But they also knew that they could not stand by and do nothing. As the ship moved toward the burning planet, Darius felt a surge of both fear and hope. Fear for what lay ahead, for the battles yet to come. But hope, too, hope that this act of defiance would be the spark that ignited humanity's rise. The galaxy had underestimated them for too long. It was time to show them what humanity was truly capable of. President Selene Meyer stood in the heart of Earth's command center, a cavernous room lit by the cold glow of holographic displays and the hum of advanced machinery. The air was thick with tension, the kind that presses against the chest and makes every breath feel heavier. Before her, a massive screen projected the live feed from the Lumiran system. Fires raged across the once pristine landscapes of Lumira Prime, the planet's crystalline cities now nothing more than blackened ruins. The image flickered with static, but the devastation was clear. Her hands, clasped tightly behind her back, trembled ever so slightly. The room was silent, save for the quiet murmurs of officers monitoring the situation. Selene's gaze remained fixed on the screen, her sharp eyes reflecting both sorrow and fury. She could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on her shoulders. Billions of lives had been lost, and humanity could no longer afford to stand idle. Slowly, she turned to Admiral Elias Ward, a man whose stern face bore the scars of countless battles. His uniform was immaculate, but his weary eyes betrayed the burden of the decisions he had made over the years. "Activate Eden's Wrath," she said, her voice steady but laced with steel. "It's time the galaxy learned what humanity is capable of." For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions a mix of fear and resolve. They all knew what Eden's Wrath was, humanity's most closely guarded secret, a weapon of unparalleled power. It had been built in the shadows, hidden from the prying eyes of the Galactic Concorde. For decades, it had remained dormant, a sleeping giant waiting for the right moment to awaken. That moment had come. Deep within the asteroid belt, far from the bustling colonies and trade routes, Eden's Wrath stirred. To the untrained eye, it appeared to be nothing more than a massive asteroid, its surface pockmarked and jagged like any other celestial rock. But beneath its rocky exterior lay a marvel of human ingenuity, a fortress of unimaginable power. Massive engines, buried deep within its core, roared to life, sending vibrations rippling through the surrounding void. The asteroid began to move, its trajectory shifting as it set its course for the Lumaran system. On its surface, concealed panels slid open with a hiss, revealing an array of weaponry that bristled like the quills of a deadly predator. Cannons capable of firing energy beams that could pierce the hulls of the most advanced warships. Missile silos hidden beneath layers of reinforced armor. And yet, for all its destructive potential, Eden's Wrath moved with an eerie grace, its engines propelling it forward with a quiet determination. The Zarith fleet, still circling the smoldering remains of Lumara Prime, detected its approach. In the command ship, Admiral Threx stood before a glowing tactical display, his reptilian eyes narrowing as he studied the readings. His scales, dark and polished like obsidian, shimmered under the dim light of the bridge. A sneer curled across his sharp, angular face. "What is this?" he hissed, his voice a low growl. "A rogue asteroid? Destroy it." The Zarith ships moved into formation, their sleek, angular designs reflecting the cold efficiency of their creators. Energy beams lanced out from their weapons, streaks of brilliant light that cut through the darkness of space. They struck Eden's Wrath's surface with blinding flashes, but the asteroid did not falter. The advanced armor, a composite of materials far beyond anything the Zarith had encountered, absorbed the attacks with ease. The energy dissipated harmlessly, leaving the asteroid unscathed. On board the Vanguard, Admiral Ward watched the unfolding scene from his command chair. His voice, calm and commanding, echoed across the battlefield. "Zarith Fleet, this is Admiral Elias Ward of the Terran Defense Force. Surrender or face annihilation." The transmission crackled through the Zarith ships, reaching Admiral Threx. For a moment, there was silence on the Zarith bridge. Then, Threx threw his head back and laughed, a harsh, guttural sound that filled the room. "Humans," he spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "You dare challenge the Zarith Empire? Destroy them." The Zarith fleet unleashed a barrage of firepower, their weapons lighting up the void like a storm of meteors. But Eden's Wrath pressed on, undeterred. Its engines burned brighter, propelling it closer to the enemy fleet. Then, with a sudden burst of movement, the asteroid began to reveal its true nature. Panels slid open across its surface, and the hidden weaponry came to life. From the command center on Earth, President Meyer and her team watched as Eden's Wrath retaliated. Beams of energy, brighter and more intense than anything the Zarith had ever faced, erupted from the asteroid's cannons. They cut through the enemy ships with terrifying precision, slicing through shields and armor as though they were paper. Explosions blossomed in the darkness, brief but brilliant, as Zarith vessels were torn apart. Admiral Threx's sneer faded, replaced by a look of disbelief. What is this?" he muttered, his claws digging into the edge of the tactical display. "How can humans?" But there was no time for answers. The battlefield had become a slaughter, the Zarith fleet crumbling under the relentless assault of Eden's Wrath. On board the Vanguard, Admiral Ward's expression was grim. He knew this was only the beginning. Humanity had revealed its hand, and the galaxy would never see them the same way again. As the Zarith fleet continued to fall, the message was clear: humanity was no longer content to be underestimated. They had risen from the shadows, their wrath awakened, and the galaxy would learn to fear them. Dr. Lyra Quinn stood in the heart of Eden's Wrath, her hands hovering over the glowing control panel. The air around her seemed to vibrate with raw energy, a low hum that grew louder with each passing second. Her face was illuminated by the pulsating lights of the console, shadows dancing across her sharp features. She was calm, focused, but deep in her chest, her heart beat like a war drum. This was the moment she had prepared for, the culmination of years of secret work, and yet the weight of it pressed down on her like a crushing wave. Energy levels stabilizing, Lyra said, her voice steady but tinged with tension. She glanced at the monitor, where streams of data cascaded in rapid succession. Main cannon charging. Around her, the control room was alive with activity. Scientists and engineers worked in synchronized precision, their faces pale with a mix of awe and fear. The walls of the chamber glowed faintly, as if the ship itself was coming alive, its immense power coursing through every circuit, every vein of its artificial body. This was no ordinary weapon. It was a force of nature, a god of destruction forged by human hands. Admiral Elias Ward's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Status, Dr. Quinn. Lyra's fingers danced across the console as she checked the final readouts. The cannon was ready. She turned to face the Admiral, her expression unreadable, though her eyes burned with determination. Main cannon ready, she reported, her voice firm. Ward nodded, his face grim. He stood tall, his presence commanding, but there was a heaviness in his gaze. He knew what this meant, what it would mean for humanity, for the galaxy. There was no turning back now. The Zarith had forced their hand, and humanity would respond in kind. Fire, he commanded. For a brief moment, there was silence. The hum of the ship reached a crescendo, and then the cannon fired. The beam that erupted from Eden's wrath was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. It was not just a weapon, it was a force of pure, unrelenting energy, a column of light so bright it seemed to pierce the fabric of space itself. It surged forward with terrifying speed, a blinding stream of destruction that tore through the void like a vengeful god's wrath. The first Zarith ships in its path disintegrated instantly, their sleek, black hulls melting away as if they were made of paper. The beam did not stop. It cut through the fleet like a scythe through a field of wheat, leaving nothing but glowing debris in its wake. Explosions rippled across the battlefield, silent in the vacuum of space but no less devastating. Ships that had once been symbols of Zarith dominance were now nothing more than scattered fragments, their crews obliterated in the blink of an eye. Dr. Quinn watched the destruction unfold on the monitors, her breath caught in her throat. She had known the cannon's power in theory, had calculated its potential down to the smallest detail. But seeing it in action was something else entirely. It was beautiful in a way, terrible, but beautiful. The beam painted the darkness with streaks of light, a deadly masterpiece that left no room for doubt. Humanity had created something that could not be ignored. On the Zarith flagship, Admiral Threx stood frozen, his obsidian eyes wide with disbelief. The tactical display before him was a sea of red, his fleet vanishing one ship at a time. He could feel the vibrations of his own ship as the beam approached, its energy rippling through space like the roar of an unstoppable storm. "No," he whispered, his voice barely audible. His claws gripped the edge of the console, his composure unraveling. This cannot be. But it was. The beam reached his flagship, engulfing it in a blinding flash of light. For a moment, the ship's silhouette was visible against the brilliance, a dark shadow swallowed by the inferno. And then it was gone. The flagship, the pride of the Zarith Empire, was reduced to nothingness. In less than a minute, it was over. The Zarith fleet, the most powerful military force in the galaxy, had been annihilated. The battlefield was eerily silent, the void now littered with the glowing remnants of what had once been an unstoppable armada. The stars shone coldly in the distance, indifferent to the destruction. Admiral Ward stood motionless, his hands clasped behind his back. He stared at the screen, his expression unreadable. Around him, the crew of Eden's Wrath let out a collective breath they hadn't realized they were holding. Some looked relieved, others stunned. A few whispered prayers under their breath, their voices trembling. Dr. Lyra Quinn sank back into her chair, her hands trembling slightly. She closed her eyes for a moment, the weight of what they had done settling over her. It was victory, yes. But it was also something else. Something darker. She could feel it in her chest, a hollow ache that would not go away. Admiral Ward's voice broke the silence. The Zarith Empire has been dealt a blow they will never recover from, he said, his tone steady but heavy. Let this be a message to the galaxy. Humanity will not be underestimated. Not anymore. The crew nodded, their faces grim. They knew the truth. This was not just a victory, it was a declaration. The galaxy had seen humanity's wrath, and it would never forget. But as the light of the cannon's destruction faded, leaving only the cold darkness of space, one question lingered in the minds of all who had witnessed it. What price would humanity pay for wielding such power? The galaxy trembled in the aftermath of the Zarith fleet's annihilation. Word of the destruction spread like wildfire, carried on hurried transmissions and whispered in the shadows of distant star systems. Planets that had once looked upon humanity with disdain now turned their gazes toward Earth, their leaders gripped by a mixture of awe and fear. The name Eden's Wrath was spoken in hushed tones, as if invoking it too loudly might summon its terrible power. The Aetherenes, a race of luminous beings who had long regarded themselves as the intellectual and spiritual apex of the galaxy, were the first to react. Their crystalline cities, suspended in the shimmering nebulae of the Andromeda sector, buzzed with frantic activity. Counselors convened in their great halls of light, their translucent forms flickering with agitation. For centuries, they had dismissed humanity as little more than an ambitious, chaotic species. But now, their arrogance had turned to dread. How could creatures so young, so seemingly primitive, have created a weapon capable of erasing the Zarith fleet in mere moments? It defied everything they thought they knew. In the shadowed depths of the Kriath Dominion, the reaction was even more visceral. The Kriath, a warrior race whose fleets had dominated the Outer Rim for centuries, held a reputation for their ruthlessness and unshakable confidence. But when news of the Zarith defeat reached their war councils, silence fell over their blood-red chambers. Their warlords, hulking figures clad in ceremonial armor, exchanged uneasy glances. The Kriath had always viewed humanity as a minor nuisance, a species barely worth their attention. Now, they saw them as something far more dangerous. Without a word, they began the quiet withdrawal of their fleets from contested territories near human space. For the first time in centuries, the Kriath chose caution over conquest. Even the mighty Concord Council, the governing body that claimed to oversee the peace and order of the galaxy, was thrown into chaos. Delegates from every major species filled the great chamber, their voices rising in a cacophony of fear and accusation. The towering amphitheater, usually a place of measured debate, had become a storm of panic. Some demanded immediate sanctions against Earth, fearing that humanity's newfound power would destabilize the fragile balance of the galaxy. Others argued for diplomacy, warning that provoking humanity might invite disaster. And in the midst of it all, the human delegation sat in silence, their expressions unreadable. They had no need to speak. The galaxy was already listening. Back on Earth, the mood was one of triumph and unease. The streets of every major city were filled with celebrations, people cheering and waving flags, their voices echoing through the night. But beneath the surface, there was an undercurrent of tension. The destruction of the Zarith fleet had been a victory, yes, but it was a victory that came with questions that few dared to voice. What had humanity become? And what would they do with the power they now held? In the Grand Chamber of the United Nations, President Selene Meyer prepared to address the world. The room was packed with diplomats, military leaders, and journalists, their faces reflecting a mixture of hope and apprehension. Outside, billions watched the broadcast, their eyes fixed on the screen as they waited for their leader to speak. Selene stood at the podium, her figure framed by the massive emblem of the United Nations behind her. She was calm, composed, but there was a fire in her eyes that commanded attention. She took a deep breath, her voice steady as she began. For decades, she said, her words carrying the weight of history, humanity has been treated as an inferior race. We have been dismissed, underestimated, and ignored. The galaxy saw us as nothing more than a fledgling species, too small, too weak to matter. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room, as if daring anyone to challenge her. But today, the galaxy learns a new truth. Humanity will not stand by while innocent lives are destroyed. We will not allow tyranny to reign unchecked. We are not conquerors. We are protectors. The room erupted into applause, the sound reverberating through the chamber like a thunderclap. But Selene raised her hand, calling for silence. Her expression grew somber, her voice softer but no less firm. Let me be clear, she continued. The power we have displayed is not one we sought out of ambition. It is a power born of necessity, forged in the fires of survival. We did not ask for this war, but we will not shy away from it. And to those who would see us as a threat, know this, humanity desires peace. But if peace is denied to us, we will fight to protect not just ourselves, but all those who cannot defend themselves. As her words echoed through the chamber, those watching across the galaxy felt the weight of them. For some, they were a beacon of hope, a promise that humanity would stand as a shield against oppression. For others, they were a warning, a reminder that Earth was no longer a silent observer in the galactic stage. Humanity had risen, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the days that followed, the reactions continued to ripple outward. Alliances shifted, treaties were rewritten, and whispers of rebellion began to spread among the oppressed worlds of the Zarith Empire. For the first time in generations, the galaxy's balance of power had been shaken to its core. And at the center of it all stood humanity, their wrath awakened, their destiny forever changed. The galaxy shifted in the months that followed, its fragile balance reshaped under humanity's steady hand. The Terran Peace Accord, forged in the aftermath of the Zarith fleet's destruction, became the foundation of a new era. It was not just a treaty, it was a promise. A promise that humanity would use its newfound power not to dominate, but to protect. And yet, there was an undeniable weight behind that promise, an unspoken warning to any who might challenge it. Humanity's ships, led by Eden's Wrath and its newly constructed sister vessels, became guardians of the galaxy. They moved silently through the stars, their presence unmistakable. These ships carried with them the memory of the Zaritha's fall, and their mere sight was enough to deter conflict. The once chaotic trade routes now thrived under humanity's watchful eye, their patrols ensuring safety for even the weakest of species. Pirates vanished into the shadows, warlords reconsidered their ambitions, and the galaxy began to heal. Former enemies, once bitter and unyielding, approached humanity with cautious respect. The Kriath, who had withdrawn their fleets in fear, sent emissaries to Earth, their towering figures humbled by the events they had witnessed. The Aetherines, whose arrogance had crumbled in the face of humanity's power, extended offers of collaboration, their luminous forms flickering with tentative hope. Even fragmented factions of the Zarith Empire sought humanity's guidance, their pride shattered but their survival instincts intact. Trade flourished like never before. Markets buzzed with activity, their stalls filled with goods from every corner of the galaxy. Exotic spices from the Kriath homeworld mingled with shimmering fabrics woven by Etherean artisans. Lumaran crystals, once rare and coveted, were now traded freely, their light symbolizing a new unity. The barriers that had divided species for centuries began to dissolve, replaced by a cautious but growing trust. Among the most profound changes was the rebirth of the Lumirans. The survivors of the Zaritha's brutal conquest had been scattered, their cities reduced to ash, their people left wandering the stars. But with humanity's help, they began to rebuild. Earth offered resources, technology, and protection, ensuring that the Lumirans could reclaim their place in the galaxy. Their new capital, Sanctuary Prime, rose from the ruins of their old world. It was a city unlike any other, its design a blend of Lumaran elegance and human ingenuity. Towers of crystalline light reached toward the heavens, their surfaces shimmering with an ethereal glow. Gardens filled with alien flora sprawled across the city, their vibrant colors a testament to life's resilience. Rivers of liquid light flowed through the streets, illuminating the paths of those who walked them. The Lumirans named the city Sanctuary Prime not just for themselves, but for the galaxy. It was a place where refugees from every species could find safety, where the broken could begin anew. It became a symbol of hope, a beacon that shone across the stars. Delegates from every corner of the galaxy visited its halls, their voices joining in discussions of peace and progress. For the first time in living memory, there was a sense of unity, a fragile, delicate unity, but unity nonetheless. Yet, as humanity's influence spread, so too did whispers of unease. Some questioned the price of this new order. Humanity's power was undeniable, and its intentions seemed noble. But there was an undercurrent of fear, a fear that humanity's wrath, once unleashed, could not be contained. The galaxy had seen what they were capable of, and the memory lingered like a shadow over every treaty, every alliance. In the quiet corners of distant worlds, resistance began to stir. There were those who resented humanity's dominance, who saw the Terran peace accord as a veiled form of control. They whispered of rebellion, of reclaiming their autonomy. They were few, scattered and disorganized, but their voices carried the seeds of dissent. For now, the galaxy remained at peace. Humanity stood as its protector, its guardian against chaos. But the stars held their secrets, and the future was far from certain. As Eden's Wrath and its sister ships patrolled the void, their silent presence a reminder of the power that had reshaped the galaxy, one question lingered in the hearts of all who gazed upon them. Was this peace a beginning or merely the calm before another storm? The stars stretched endlessly before him, their cold, eternal light shimmering against the vast expanse of darkness. Admiral Ward stood alone on the observation deck of Eden's Wrath, his hands clasped behind his back, his posture rigid yet calm. The silence of space surrounded him, broken only by the faint hum of the ship's systems, a sound so subtle it almost felt like the heartbeat of the mighty vessel itself. Through the reinforced glass, the galaxy unfolded in all its mysterious beauty. Nebulas swirled like painted clouds, their vibrant colors dancing across the void. Distant planets glimmered faintly, tiny jewels scattered across the endless black. It was breathtaking, but Ward's gaze was steady, his mind far from the beauty before him. He wasn't looking at the stars, he was looking at what they represented. Freedom. Safety. A future. This is what we fought for, he thought, the words heavy with emotion. His reflection in the glass stared back at him, the lines on his face deeper than they had been just a few years ago. The war, the sacrifices, the sleepless nights spent wondering if humanity would survive it had all led to this. A galaxy no longer ruled by fear. A galaxy where the weak were no longer trampled beneath the boots of the strong. But the cost had been high. He could still see the faces of those they'd lost, their memories lingering like ghosts in the quiet corners of his mind. Friends, comrades, entire worlds gone. And yet, their sacrifices had not been in vain. Humanity had risen from the ashes of its struggles, not as conquerors, but as guardians. And now, their watch had begun. Beyond the observation deck, the construction of new ships was already underway. Massive vessels, larger and more advanced than Eden's Wrath, were being forged in the shipyards orbiting Earth and other allied worlds. These were not weapons of conquest, they were shields, built to protect the fragile peace that humanity had worked so hard to achieve. Their designs were elegant yet imposing, their hulls gleaming like silver under the light of distant suns. Each ship carried with it a message, that humanity would not allow the darkness of tyranny to return. The galaxy itself was beginning to heal. Where once there had been chaos, there was now order. Trade routes that had been plagued by pirates now thrived, their paths safe under the watchful eyes of humanity's patrols. Planets that had lived in fear of invasion began to rebuild, their people daring to dream of a brighter future. The Kreath, the Aetherines, the Lumerans all had found a place in this new order, their differences set aside in the name of survival and progress. And yet, Ward knew that peace was a fragile thing. The galaxy was vast, its depths filled with secrets. For every alliance forged, there were whispers of dissent. For every world saved, there were those who resented humanity's rise. He could feel it, like a faint tremor beneath the surface of calm waters. Somewhere, in the shadows, threats were waiting to emerge. He didn't know when or where, but he knew they would come. That was why the patrols continued. That was why the ships grew larger, their crews more vigilant. Humanity had learned a hard truth: peace was not a gift, it was a responsibility. It required strength, resilience, and the willingness to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. It required guardians. Ward's thoughts were interrupted by the soft chime of the intercom. A voice crackled through, calm but firm. "Admiral, we've received word from the Concord Council. They're requesting assistance in the Thalvares sector. Reports of unrest." He nodded, his expression unreadable. "Understood. Prepare the fleet. We'll depart within the hour." As the intercom went silent, Ward turned back to the stars. His reflection in the glass seemed to blur, merging with the infinite expanse beyond. He could feel the weight of his duty, a burden he carried willingly. This was what they had fought for, a galaxy where no one had to live in fear. But it was also what they had sworn to protect, no matter the cost. The age of humanity's guardianship had begun. The galaxy, once fractured and bleeding, now stood on the brink of something new. Hope flickered like a fragile flame, its light spreading slowly but steadily across the stars. And though the darkness lingered at the edges, waiting for its moment, humanity stood ready. For as long as the stars burned, they would not falter. They would watch. They would protect. And the galaxy would never be the same.